I want to transition into a little bit more of a nuanced and higher level conceptual financial model that looks at the relationship between unit density and the feasibility of building these projects to begin with, because those two things are related as well. If we said, well, we want to go with 4-story buildings, we want to go with larger site plans, larger sites that are dedicated to the area, that's going to inhibit the ability for developers to build units. And the units is what make these projects pencil. So before we, go off on the idea of saying, well, let's just have a smaller building footprint and lower unit count, and we'd be happy with that. You have to ask the question, is it financially feasible? Okay, don't panic. I'm going to explain this graphic. This shows a conceptual model for when a development pencils out. And so this is going to be relative. This model could be applied to a single family standalone. This could be applied to a duplex. It could be applied to a walk-up and a mid-rise building or a high-rise building. All of those run on the same conceptual principles that I'm going to explain to you using this graphic. On this axis, we're looking at the cost per dwelling. So this is how much it costs to produce each dwelling unit in any of those different kinds of scenarios. On the bottom here, you have density. It's the number of units that are allowed in the code per area of land. We typically use acres in our codes. What you're seeing in this gray line is the average cost per unit. So some units are going to be bigger and cost more. Some units are going to be smaller and cost less. But that's the average cost per unit for that building type. This orange line is always going to be higher than the average cost per unit because it's basically taking the incremental cost of adding new units, called the marginal cost. So every time you add a new unit, you're adding new margin to the cost of the development. And this dashed line is the market price. This is the price that you would get either for rent or for sale of the unit. The marginal costs will increase as density goes up. As the marginal cost increases, it will at some point hit what is considered the market price. That market price where the marginal cost crosses the market price is referred to as the optimal density. This is the density at which the project is penciling best. It's making the most return on the investment. It makes the most sense for the developer to do it. When you get above that market price, when the marginal cost, the cost to build a unit, gets above the market price, then you're starting to lose returns. You're getting diminishing returns on that marginal cost investment. If your marginal cost doesn't get into this gray box, this is sort of the profitability zone. This is the price of land that it costs to do the development. Then the project is just not going to pencil at all. It's just, you're never going to pencil it. So that means that the development won't be built. And so the way to look at this is that the developer is always going to want to hit this optimal density point, but will accept being within this range. The area that we're talking about in terms of hitting the right density count to make sure that people actually build the units that we want them to build. These two areas are infeasible. So from a financial feasibility point, you get above the market price or you get below the area of the land value, and the project isn't penciling, either because you're getting diminishing returns on the investment, so there's no point in investing more, or because the marginal cost doesn't maximize the return on the investment to the point or even meet the threshold criteria for getting a return on the investment. That means that the ideal density is between where the marginal cost enters this area of land value, if you will, and where it exits the area of land value. So this is going to vary by area. It's going to vary by market. It's going to vary by development type. There's lots of detail to this, but I want us to understand this concept that there's a Goldilocks range. in density, where if we don't set the density high enough, you're going to be in this region and the projects are going to be infeasible. If you set the density too high, let's say 8-story buildings are in this range where the marginal cost is never going to pencil to make that return on the investment, you're never going to see an 8-story building built. But what you will see built is what the market can bear. And so this might be 4, this might be 5, it might be 6-story buildings. So if we say to ourselves as a community, we only want to have 4-story buildings because we can hit our unit count that we want, unless we are absolutely positive that 4-story buildings is not in this region and is instead in this region, we would be making a mistake. Because if 4-story buildings is in this region, they will not be built. So that's the main point behind this graphic, and I hope I didn't put too many people to sleep there. Okay, so just to recap, housing production can be met with smaller stature buildings. There's absolutely no question about that. And the financial feasibility of projects will be impacted by the development standards, what we set in play as community amenities, what we require in terms of open space, what we require in terms of energy efficiency, and all these other things that are of great importance to us in our community all have a financial impact on the projects. And ultimately, unless we develop a code that allows developments to pencil, to make money, to make a return on the investment, those developments will not be built.